Hey everyone, is there enough Bitcoin to go around? If the entire world is using Bitcoin for every single transaction, everywhere in the world, all the time, it's the only worldwide currency. Is there enough Bitcoin to go around to serve that purpose? And what if some of the Bitcoin is permanently lost? Now, we know some of it is permanently lost, but some people estimate as much as 3 or 4 million Bitcoin out of 21 million are permanently lost, even though I think that number is too high, even if it's a million. What if some of the Bitcoin is permanently lost forever? Is that a problem? The answer is there is plenty of Bitcoin to go around. It could serve as the money of the entire world, and it actually doesn't matter if some of the Bitcoin is lost forever. And I want to explain why, because this is a concept that a lot of people have a hard time understanding because it's not easy to follow. So, with any money, you need the money to be portable, so you can send it over space. You need it to be durable, so it keeps value over time, and you need it to be divisible so that it can be divided into subunits so that if you want to buy an egg, you can use a small amount for an egg. If you want to buy a house, you can use a large amount for a house. So as long as money, if we just use two of those three, if we take the durable part off the table, then that leaves you with divisibility and portability. So as long as the money is divisible and it is portable, any amount of any money can be used to run an economy as long as it is scarce enough, which is the one sort of overarching macro thing. So let me tell you what I mean. We could run the entire world economic system that runs on the US dollar. We could run that entire system on a single US dollar, one US dollar, if that one US dollar was divisible enough. Now, right now it's not because the US dollar is only divisible into 100 pennies. Obviously, you can't run an economy if your entire monetary unit is a single dollar and 100 pennies. You can't run it. But if we divided a single US dollar into nano pennies and pico pennies and, whatever micro pennies, if we subdivided the US dollar into quadrillions of subunits, you could run the entire economy on a single US dollar. Again, the question is it scarce? You can't do that if you're going to turn around and print a second dollar or a fifth dollar or a 100th dollar. But if the entire thing was limited to $1, and if they only printed more money at a rate of a few pennies per year, again, subdivided into a gazillion subpennies, then you could run the entire economy on that. So once you understand that, you realize you could run the entire economy of the entire world on 21 million Bitcoin. Your only questions are, is it divisible enough? So yes, a Bitcoin can be subdivided into 100 million units called Satoshis. And when Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, invented Bitcoin, he anticipated that it would be used for the entire world economy. So he added up all of the money in the entire world that's used by everyone for everything in all economies. And then he set the basic unit, the smallest unit of a Bitcoin, which is one Satoshi, which is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. He set that equal to about one US penny, assuming that Bitcoin was used worldwide. So now, right now, a Bitcoin is worth a Satoshi. You can get about 10 Satoshis for a penny. So even with his early math, he anticipated Bitcoin would increase in value by 10 times its current value. And there's been a ton of inflation since that formula was worked out between 2007 and 2008. And so, honestly, you need Bitcoin to be probably 20 times its current value, 20 times, 2,000% growth, even to get close to what Satoshi Nakamoto originally anticipated. Okay, but regardless, he also set it up where Bitcoin could be further subdivided if necessary. So it could be actually subdivided into small units. So what happens when you permanently lose a Bitcoin? Let's say you start with 21 million Bitcoin and then somebody loses a million of them. So about, let's call it roughly 5% a little less than 5% of the total supply, gone for good, disappears from the world, lost in a landfill, lost forever. What happens? Well, what happens is all of the remaining Bitcoin becomes slightly more valuable. It's the way Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, described it is when you permanently lose Bitcoin, it's like giving a little gift to every single person who still owns Bitcoin in the world. And if you own a lot of Bitcoin, you get more of that gift. If you own a little Bitcoin, you get less of that gift. It's called pro rata. You get a pro rata share. So if 5% of all of the Bitcoin that will ever exist is lost, that means that everybody's Bitcoin in the entire world is now 5% more valuable. So, so, and someone asked in the chat, where am I living? I obviously live in Madison. I travel frequently to the island of Roatan in the Caribbean for the Prosper Project down there. But right now, my primary home base is Madison, Mississippi, just like it always has been. So, to answer a question live here. Anyway, so to sort of rewind, um, so yes, Bitcoin, any amount of Bitcoin is usable for the entire world's money. If it needs to be more subdivided than 100 million units, it can be, just like if the US penny had to be divided into tenths of a penny. That's easy to do. It doesn't break anything if you divide pennies into one tenth of a penny. Just like with a pizza, if you have a pizza and somebody says, well, how many slices, how hungry are you? Because it determines how many slices I divide it into. The answer is, well, that has no bearing on the calories in the pizza. Whether you divide it into 8 slices, 10 slices, or 16 slices, the slices just get smaller. But what matters when you're eating a pizza is what percent of the whole do I have? So when you have US dollars, what matters is what percent of all the US dollars does this dollar represent? When you own Bitcoin, what matters is what percent of all the Bitcoin in the world does my Bitcoin represent? All money works that way. The value of it, including gold. When you have an ounce of gold, the value of that ounce of gold is heavily determined by, it's obviously determined on supply and demand as well, but the scarcity is how much does that 1 ounce of gold represent as compared to all the gold in the world? So when you're thinking about a money, that is what the concept you have to understand is any amount of money can be used. It's just a matter of, is it limited, or how fast does that amount of money grow? In the case of Bitcoin, there's only over 21 million. In the case of gold, it grows about 2% per year. That's the amount of new gold that gets dug out of the ground every single year is about 2%. So in the case of gold, it's about 2%. In the case of the US dollar, it's about 7% on average over the last 100 plus years. The US government has printed about 7% more US dollars every single year on average. So the growth rate of Bitcoin is trending towards zero. It's 0.75% now, but it'll ultimately land at zero with only 21 million Bitcoin. So you've got, basically the absolute supply cap of Bitcoin, the growth rate is zero. The growth rate of gold is 2%. The growth rate of the US dollar is 7%. Most of the world's fiat currencies, which means government made up currencies, are growing at about 14% a year. So that's why they're losing value so quickly. So to sort of recap, any amount of money can be used. It doesn't matter if I take a $100 bill and I tie it around a rock, throw it into the reservoir, everybody else's US dollars become a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit more valuable because that $100 will never resurface. That $100 is now out of circulation. Now, the amount everybody's money increases in value is equivalent to that $100 bill as a percentage of all the US dollars in the world, which is tens of trillions. So obviously, nobody would even notice. Now, if 5% of the Bitcoin in the world was unrecoverable, meaning no one was ever figured out how to access it or if it was permanently lost, first of all, that's already factored into the price. And second, um, it would be a 5% sort of a 5% uplift to the price of Bitcoin over time, but which is a lot more than throwing $100 bill, in the reservoir. Still, still a pretty small percentage overall. So it does not matter if Bitcoin is lost, because all that happens is the value of the remaining Bitcoin increases to absorb the value that was lost or unrecoverable. Um, I was going to go into some additional details as far as the visibility and portability of gold and other fiat currencies, but I think I will probably save that for another video. So to summarize here, though, on this front, some people, including Michael Saylor, who owns more than 17,000 Bitcoin, so he owns billions of dollars of Bitcoin, he has hypothesized that rather than losing Bitcoin, if you want to gift value to the world pro rata to everyone, you can, if you don't want to leave it to your, descendants in a will, you can just destroy your Bitcoin. Now, people like, the vast majority of people would not willingly destroy Bitcoin. And what I was going to say earlier is a product like Bitkey, Bitkey, which their website is bitkey.world, that sort of product will not let you destroy Bitcoin. It's built so that you can't destroy the Bitcoin, so that you can't accidentally lose it. You can't accidentally, have it disappear or be unrecoverable. So products like Bitkey will not let you destroy Bitcoin. But if you use something like a Ledger or a Trezor, which are also other Bitcoin hardware devices, they don't stop you from destroying it. So if you got one of those devices, transferred all your Bitcoin to it, smashed it with a hammer, and then burned the seed phrase, your Bitcoin would be gone forever. No, that's why I recommend products like Bitkey, because it's impossible to accidentally destroy your Bitcoin. It's also impossible to destroy your Bitcoin on purpose, which, again, Bitkey was designed so that you couldn't screw it up. And one way of making sure you can't screw it up is making sure the Bitcoin can never be destroyed. But if somebody wanted to destroy their Bitcoin, they could use a Ledger or a Trezor or something like that to permanently destroy, or not destroy their Bitcoin, but to make it unrecoverable. It will always be there on the blockchain, but if nobody can get access to it, then it just sits there forever. So it's basically permanently lost, even though it's there, it's unrecoverable, it's unusable. But anyway, so some people, including Michael Saylor, have hypothesized that if somebody has a ton of Bitcoin and they don't know who to give it to, and they don't feel good about giving it to everyone, there's actually a way in Bitcoin, which is unavailable in every other mechanism of value. There's actually a way that you can gift the value of your Bitcoin to everyone in the world that owns Bitcoin pro rata. Means, in equal share, depending on how much Bitcoin they own. And that's by literally just destroying it. And if you destroyed it, the value of everyone else's Bitcoin would go up a tiny little bit based on how much you had as a percent of the total. So if somebody who owned, 1/100th of 1% of all the Bitcoin decided that they wanted to effectively gift that Bitcoin to everyone else pro rata, and they destroyed Bitcoin equivalent to 1/100th of 1% of all the Bitcoin in the world, then everyone else's Bitcoin would increase in value over time by 1/100th of 1% because that Bitcoin would be out of circulation. So hopefully that helps you understand that we don't have to worry about there not being enough Bitcoin to go around. We don't have to worry about the old Bitcoin back from 2009, 2010, 2011, when it was hard. The technology was not very advanced or sophisticated to store Bitcoin effectively. So the Bitcoin that got lost in the very early days when it was so new that it didn't even have a price. And because it didn't have a price, people were not even worried about preserving its value because they didn't think it had value. So they might have had, 1,000 Bitcoin, but it was literally worthless. So they just threw it away with their old computer because they're like, well, it doesn't have a price. And if it doesn't have a price now, maybe it'll never have a price. And so they just threw it away. And if those 1,000 Bitcoin or 8,000 Bitcoin are gone for good, it just makes the rest of our Bitcoin more valuable for all of us who still have Bitcoin. So that's the way that works. I know it's a hard concept. It's a really hard concept for people to understand that any amount of a money can be used as money as long as the new issuance, meaning the new additional money that's created, as long as that is limited, and as long as the money itself is portable, and as long as it is divisible, it is sufficient as money. And Bitcoin has those characteristics better than any other asset in the entire world. Bitcoin is more scarce, more divisible, more durable, more portable than any other money that humans have ever invented or discovered in human history. And that's why Bitcoin will be the future monetary system of the world, is because it has better monetary properties than anything else that exists anywhere in the world. And because it has better monetary properties than anything else that exists anywhere in the world, that's why Bitcoin will ultimately become the future monetary system of the world, and it's well on its way to doing that already. So I'll share some additional details about how fiat currencies are, not are getting so bad that they're not even portable anymore. I'll share some details about that in a separate video. Thanks, everyone.